Well, this is Brian, and we're broadcasting from Wellington, New Zealand on the 6th of June 2016, and I've just come back from a trip around Europe, extensively Northern Europe, I guess, although we were in France, and for southwest France, should I say, just out of Montpellier, a small commune called Ceyraz that I have a soft spot for. I've been to many times over the years. Anyway, so I thought we'd have a little catch up on a topic that's weighed quite heavily with me for the last year and a bit, and that is what does the earth really look like? To start off, if I had a dalliance with the Book of Enoch. I had seen references in the Bible to Enoch, but never really had a full understanding of who Enoch was. But since reading the Book of Enoch, and I've also read the books of Adam and Eve, books that were not included in the original library, which turned into the Bible, but were quoted from, and particularly Enoch is quoted from, something like 120 times the Book of Enoch is in the Bible. So I thought, well, if that's good enough to be quoted, it can be taken seriously. And it was then that one of my friends on a closed page we have on Facebook called Our Hidden Reality, small group of people, one of the members of that group raised the issue of a flat earth and said, what does the actual Bible say about this? Knowing that I'd actually spent some time looking into the whole issue of creation and what did the book of Genesis and other books say, it was fascinating for me to come to the realization that actually the oldest book in the Bible is the book of Job, which is something that probably few people would be aware of. Over the years I've read Genesis many times, and much of it had been a mystery to me, but as I say, the Book of Enoch tends to turn the lights on where in the past it was lights off. So the next issue is, well, if the earth isn't a globe, what does it look like? Of course, we've had endless ridicule for a long time, several hundred years, but particularly if you were going to question the nature of reality and so forth, the accepted doctrines and dogmas. However, it was of interest to me to find that not that long ago, even the reformers were not convinced that the world was a globe. In fact, Luther and Calvin appear to be supporters of a flat earth, as Enoch was. So how did we get to a point where this whole issue of what the earth looks like, fundamental principles of understanding reality and so forth, how did they arise? And I mean, the fact that the average person just accepts that the earth is a globe and that we are no longer the centre of the universe, whereas in Luther's time the earth definitely was the centre of the universe. So pushing the earth out and putting the sun at the centre was a major change, both philosophically and theologically. And it didn't happen overnight. And even with Copernicus, who put forward his theory, which he hadn't actually built a mathematical model of at the time, unfortunately Newton really lent a helping hand in promoting the idea of a globe. Because I think the interesting thing is that these people wanted to believe in a creator, and certainly Newton did, but he wasn't so happy about the Bible being the guiding principles to what? Reality, to our picture of reality. I think that's been a mistake. I think the acceptance that God had spoken via verbalized propositions to man through the library of the Bible is fundamental to understanding the world that we live in. So, unfortunately and sadly, anyone who revises the current accepted dogmas there's a long history of persecution, and indeed people were burned at the stake because they started asking questions. But Luther did actually bring everything back to the table when he announced solely by Scripture. And unfortunately, many of the so-called evangelicals never really took that on board the way that they were meant to. So some aspects the whole issue was what were the fundamental principles that we would fight over. And sadly, it ought not to be that some issues are worth fighting over and others aren't. The whole thing was, if the Bible was God's specific revelation to man, then it was worthy of very close and in-depth study. But there's been a breach between the propositions of Scripture and how we understand reality, and quite frankly, the only way that I can explain what's happened is that you can't talk about evil without talking about personality, and the biggest personality behind evil, without a doubt, is Lucifer, who after the fall becomes Satan, and Satan has had his hand in our picture of reality ever since he was cast out and the earth became his abode. He is, after all, the ruler of this world. So why should we be surprised that amongst his list of deceptions, the greatest deception was what the earth actually looked like. And it couldn't possibly be the centre of the universe and of special significance. So out goes the centre as understood, the earth, and in comes the sun. And of course there is an interesting construction of how, and that's what Lucifer wants us all to think, of course, is that we aren't important. We are products of chance. There is no creator, because he couldn't be the creator, and so therefore the next best thing would be to have no creator as far as he was concerned. You cannot think of evil without thinking about the personality behind it. So Lucifer is somebody who has to be taken seriously, and in fact I think is probably responsible for the most significant and major misconceptions of how we understand ourselves and reality. Okay, so I'm not finished with this whole debate of the flat earth and what it means. I am fascinated by the many new aspects to it that I have been introduced to through my study of what material was available, and thankfully to the internet there's a huge amount of information to be sifted and sorted through. I'm not saying that it's all reliable, but we are looking at a methodology that will help. Now, Chuck Missler has talked about how we need to have a guide to deal with the deceptions that are being thrown at us. Well, I think the globe is possibly the biggest deception that's been thrown. So in all my travelling recently, and I've been high up in the air in my jet, in my flying, searching for the curve, so I was searching for the philosopher's stone, such an elusive thing, this curve that they all talk about. The horizon, so flat, and it's become so fascinating to me that I am putting a lot of time into trying to sort of make some sense of this unbelievable hoax that has taken place. Right, so there we are. We're still out there. We're still open to what the truth is in terms of what is the fundamental reality of what the earth really looks like, apart from what we experience. And we certainly don't experience it much because we're kind of bound to the earth unless we get up high up into the air. It's hard for us to get a perspective of it. So a handful of people will have a slightly different view of what the earth looks like, but most people are relying on what somebody else has told them. Well, that's not good enough in terms of establishing a methodology to deal with the nature of this unbelievable place we call Earth, to deal with its shape and its character and the implications of it being flat. Of course, as my friend Nick Joliffe says, with wrinkles. It's got wrinkles though, Brian. Well, of course. And what is it that is above the earth? Of course, that's the next thing is the dome. It is so often related to the concept of the flat earth. Just remember, we're talking about concepts and models here. And these models, this model of the flat earth and the dome are worthy of a very careful investigation. So the story continues, and we'll speak to you soon.